Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Corridor Cast. Right now, it's actually just me and my friend, Addy Shankar. Welcome, Addy.
Dude, so good to see you, man.
It's good to see you, too. I haven't seen you in like 2 years. I haven't seen you since before the apocalypse.
Yeah.
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 So, for those out there who haven't heard of you or seen any of the stuff you've made, could you give us just like a little intro as to, I guess, who you are?
I'm terrible at this.
I mean, I can take a shot if you want
Yeah,
me to.
why don't you take a shot?
All right.
Could you?
Yeah. I'll do it. So, Addy, I guess I will give my like interpretation of like my understanding of you, and then I'll give like the more general audience version. But I've always understood you to be someone who's out there trying to make movies, films, shows, etc., media, but trying to find a way to make the stuff that you want to make in a world where it's controlled mostly by, focus groups and, money with strings attached and all that kind of stuff.
Conglomerates that just kind of have a narrative.
Yeah, it's the studio game. It's
totally.
It's big Hollywood, right?
Right.
But you've actually managed to successfully pull some projects off. Projects that people probably have heard of, like Dread is a fantastic film. I really enjoyed it. The Gray, the Castlevania series on Netflix, probably even more that aren't coming to mind off the top of my head right now.
Maybe the short films, like the Bootleg.
Yeah, that's right. Of course.
That,
the Power Rangers one, the Punisher one.
Yeah.
Which are all amazing. But
Venom, Truth in Journalism. There was a Dark Mr. Rogers one, a Dark Pokemon.
Oh, right.
Yeah, the Dark Mr. Rogers one is my favorite.
But you're kind of like back when we started doing Corridor Digital.
Yes.
And we were doing like our short films, mostly just inspired by video games. You were basically doing the same thing, but bigger and like in the actual kind of like Hollywood sphere. You were getting, actual name actors to kind of come into these short films. But you had kind of like the same idea of like, I just want to do this.
Yes.
And then you're just doing it.
Right.
Which is so rare to find out there with people who are actually making it.
It was crazy for me because like you were the first person I met that was like, I was like, wow, you're like me. Like,
yeah.
But what was interesting, I guess, weird when we first met. Mm-hmm. I mean, remember I had like an office, I had like a studio deal. I was like making like Hollywood studio movies, and like I like didn't want to be doing I didn't want to be there. I was like but I somehow I fell into this situation where all of a sudden I was like in the Hollywood machine, and I was inspired by what you were doing.
Well, thank you.
When I did the first Punisher fan film, which was 2012. So I planned it in 2011. We pulled it off in 2012. And I guess for the people listening who have no idea what this is, it was Thomas Jane who played the Punisher in the 2004 Lionsgate Punisher movie, kind of reprising his role. Ron Perlman, you might know as Hellboy, and just kind of a litany of other things. He was in it as well, but I didn't make it for YouTube. Like I didn't know what YouTube was.
Right.
Like I didn't understand that you could just open a YouTube account and then upload stuff. Like I thought like, I was like, oh, this is more bureaucratic red tape. Like, so we made it. And then I didn't know what to do with it. And
yeah, what do you do with like a high-end short film based on an IP that isn't necessarily yours? Like, yeah.
And I didn't really care. I just wanted to get it out there. And I'd seen the Machinima logo. I'm also technologically illiterate, right? So I saw the Machinima logo, and I'm like, oh, I should get in touch with them. And so I talked to someone at Machinima, and I'd said, hey, I made this thing. Do you want it? And the person I talked to didn't know who the Punisher was, or.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I was like, oh, this is weird. Maybe this thing I've made is like really stupid. And then this random person I met, just one day, like random, was like, you should open a YouTube channel. And I'm like, yeah, there's gonna be like a lot of red tape. Like I just don't want to deal with like corporations, and they're like, dude, it's like a click of a button. Like if you have Gmail, you can just open a YouTube page. And I'm like, okay. So then I did and just uploaded it. And then it got like millions of views in like a few hours.
Yeah. No one else is doing that kind of stuff. You know, it was like a, holy crap, somebody actually like with a good camera and good actors and a good crew and good posts went out and actually made a really cool short film. And like, that wasn't really a thing that was happening on YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah, it was nuts. And to me, I didn't realize that, hey, there was a YouTube community. I didn't realize any of this stuff. I was just like, whoa, there's like an online distribution platform where you don't have to ask permission. That's amazing. Like,
yeah.
Because I was so used to dealing with international distributors who were like, well, cut this or move that or reshuffle this or cast this person in it. And you're like,
that's not,
dude,
why would I cast that person?
Channing Tatum cannot play like a British aristocrat. Like, what the fuck are you, you know?
Yeah.
But so much of movie making was that before.
Yeah.
Before the digital revolution, so to speak. It was like a litany of middle people who were forcing things to be things to resemble things that came before it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. I mean, there's still a lot of that. I mean, you see a lot of that with, with all like the YouTube Red and I guess a lot of the shows happening on like Amazon Prime and Netflix where they're just hiring all the old TV people where it's like, everybody kind of moved to those platforms because they didn't want to watch the old TV format, and it's just kind of.
But it's just they've just exactly.
Yeah.
It's weird. I miscalculated that piece.
Yeah.
Because I remember coming to you and being like, Niko, sit down. I wanted to tell you something. You're the future.
We should preface this that like you and I like about once every 1 to 2 years we have a deep conversation about the state of the industry.
Right.
And like, there's insights that you've given me that like have stuck with me forever with these conversations. And yeah, I remember like the Year of the Future one, but the one thing that stands out to me is like, you were talking about how like, you just want to figure out a way to be able to make the movies and the shows that you saw that, you're passionate about without the incredible burden that it takes to make them happen, because currently it costs millions and millions of dollars to do the big films. Like, how do you get to the point where you can just make them because you want to make, like, a writer can sit down and just start writing, all they need is they don't even need a computer, just a pencil and paper. So there's no barrier to entry there. It's just your creativity and you get to just go and create, same thing with drawing. But if you want to make a movie, there is a barrier to entry, and like that barrier gets lower every single year. And I think that's a lot of what's inspired our career and what's inspired your career is seeing this change and like trying to get ahead of that and like utilize it. Yeah.
Yeah. The democratization of art, creation of art, just the tools, and like the distribution of it. I have to believe that future generations will create things that are just completely new and completely original and almost feel like new mediums. And they'll be able to do it because of the things you're doing, right? You're paving the way for the next generation or next generations in the way that the indie filmmakers of the 80s and 90s forced the art form to evolve, just like the indie filmmakers of the 70s kind of looked at how the movie studios back then were just making musicals. They're making like these fucking Robin Hood musicals and like no one cared. And then these renegade filmmakers came in and they just disrupted everything. And they made a litany of movies like, basically all the classics, everything that we consider a classic today. Yeah. Even something like The Godfather, right? That was like a rebellious movie back in the day. It wasn't like this something that like the system or the system was necessarily behind. Right. Yeah. A Rosemary's Baby, same thing. Like that was kind of an outside the box.
What do you think? What do you think there's a whole bunch to talk about here, and I'm just going to jump right to the future because I'd love to talk about the past a little bit too. But what do you think? You know, right now we have YouTube, which kind of started off as a place for people to just upload their cool videos, and it was a small community, and the community grew, and then it shifted heavily into games, and then shifted heavily after Vine went down, and it's continuing to shift heavily. And of course now there's, you know, a ton of celebrities have YouTube channels. You have a bunch of big media companies that have YouTube channels. The trending page is dominated by Tonight shows. You know, it's no longer necessarily individual creators. Sometimes it is. A lot of the creators that are famous are really just famous because of their personalities. It's basically just fancy reality TV in many ways. And it's not all bad, but those are a lot of things I've seen kind of pop up over the time here. But what do you see going forwards into the future? What do you see as like avenues for people to get out there and like make their art again, to make films or stories and media? How do you think it's going to shift?
I mean, I think it's tough. I think it's tough because the walls have come up again. I think that's the subtext to what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Like you and I were doing this in an era where you're like, I want to make stuff and get it out there, and these film school people feel pretentious. That was your experience, right?
Yep.
My experience was I'm in the Hollywood ecosystem. I don't understand what these people are talking about. I'm gonna go off and like do this thing. And there were no adults. There were no rules. You know, now YouTube it's regulated. It's heavily regulated. I'm not trying to get political about it because there is that discussion also, but it's regulated to the extent that like we're talking about one of the biggest, most significant, most powerful conglomerates in the history of the world. You know what I mean? Like this isn't what we thought it was in 2011. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
Or 2012 in my case.
That's very true. I mean, YouTube gets, I think it's like 2 billion views a month or something like that. Unique views, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, Google has all our data.
Yeah.
You know, if they want to start blackmailing everyone they can, and there's no legislative body that literally has the power to tell them not to. And look, I don't want to go too conspiracy theory because it just is what it is. But
yeah,
I do think that this speaks to systemic problems that plague the distribution of subversive art.
If you were trying to make subversive art these days, how would you go about releasing it?
Me?
Yeah.
Like me personally?
Yeah.
Like if I was like starting over again today? I don't know, because I feel like so much of who I am as an artist is a byproduct of like the 90s, growing up in the 90s, right? So if I was coming of age today, I think my reference points would just be so different. Like I wouldn't be trying to do the same thing. I probably wouldn't even be like a film person. I'd probably be like an indie video game developer. That's probably how I'd do it. Yeah.
Interesting.
Because you can make an indie video game with like 4 people.
Yeah.
And release it on Steam, right? And the gaming industry is not, and it's coming, but the gaming industry is not regulated the same way that, and not gate kept in the same manner that TV and film is. Right? Because you don't have like, for instance, I mean, I can give you like a litany of examples of how this is true, but another aspect of it is like you don't have like video game designers and developers from like the 90s coming and telling like, you know, you don't have like a guy from the 90s or a company from the 90s being like, well, Superhot's technically not a game. Right? But in movies, you have like guys like Scorsese who are like, well, that's not cinema. And you're like, what the fuck are you talking about, dude? Like, go away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's not cinema. Like, what are you talking? But you know, you have like ideological gatekeeping as well as like practical gatekeeping, right? Like, as in, you can't get this out there. Practical gatekeeping and ideological gatekeeping, where it's like, this isn't the thing that you say it is, and we are the authoritative body that is the that gets to define what this medium is and where it's going.
Yeah, it's like the thing I always think about with that is, they talk about, well, the algorithm drives things. I mean, everybody likes to talk about the algorithm in abstract.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that abstract. You just
no. I think the algorithm's like incredibly practical.
Yeah, it is.
It's practical.
But then, like, the algorithm makes certain things popular, or not makes them popular, but it discovers what people are into and then decides to serve them more of that.
Right.
But for companies like whether it's Google or Facebook, anybody, for any of them to act like they don't have control over that, it was like, well, I guess it made Jake Paul popular. Whoop, it's like you can just turn that off. You can just change the parameters. Like
totally.
At any point in time, you could just go in there and be like demonetized. And
I think also sometimes calling it an algorithm is used to obfuscate what it actually is, because it's not really an algorithm yet. Mm-hmm. It's more of an incentive structure.
Yeah.
Right. It's an incentive structure / funnel. Mm-hmm. Right. And these are choices that are being made.
Yeah. Because you have the whole monetary side of it.
Right.
Where it's like, it's the whole almost casino RPG where it's like you're trying to get more points and you do this and you get more points and you get dollars back.
Yeah. I mean, like, they want the clicks just as much as like the person making the content to get the clicks wants the clicks.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it's like, a big symbiotic relationship.
Like a lot of times, like, corporate entities like act like, oh my God, clickbait's ruining our art form. It's like, dude, you want the clickbait because you can game the clickbait. You can't game, like, what you do can't be gamed. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
And I think ultimately this is why you are the future, because what you do cannot be gamed. Mm-hmm. When you look at most content out there, and I'm going to call it content because it's just content. You look at most content out on the internet, on YouTube, right? Since call it the corporate conglomerate wave of control. I sound like a fucking conspiracy theorist. I'm really not. Since that corporate wave came in and kind of washed away a lot of the smaller, independently minded creators, a lot of the things that seem to garner attention and ride the wave of this algorithm are things that are easily kind of without an identity, right? So they're easily replicatable.
I feel like the hydraulic press channel is like a perfect example, or like, a satisfying, like, we're cutting clay with a knife. Like, that's almost just like raw content. It's like there's no person necessarily, like our personality or figure.
Right.
It's not storytelling. I'm not saying that's like, sometimes it's fun watching somebody cut clay with a knife, but it's like, it's more that, that stuff can get 30 million views per video. Right. Versus like somebody going out there and like telling a story.
Are you aware though that you're telling a meta story on top of the mini story, but within each video?
Elaborate.
Okay. So when people sign up to Corridor Digital, sure, there might be like a fun Minecraft video or a Nerf video or like a John Wick video or, oh, wow, I'm seeing that thing. But really what they're subconsciously also signing up for is the Sam and Niko story.
Like how we make our way through the industry in our career.
I mean, your art form has evolved, right? Like remember showing me that zombie video you did?
Yeah.
But way back when it was like a zombie. Yeah. Right.
Zombie Matador was it? Yeah.
It was like in the snow and like.
Oh, that one, the DayZ video.
The DayZ one. Yeah. The DayZ video. Like, you're evolving as people and filmmakers, like, in real time. That's why it's not replicatable. Because your story is your story.
Interesting. Yeah. And
your evolution is your evolution. And that's real. That's like real, right? Like you and Sam just picked up a camera and we're like, fuck it, we're going to make something. We don't quite know what we're doing, but we're going to learn and figure it out as we go along. And then like people have followed, millions of people have followed your journey. I mean, I'm not saying millions in like the abstract sense, like literally, like how many millions of subscribers are there on your channel? Like 9?
9 million on Corridor and basically 5 million on Corridor Crew.
So, you know, assuming a great deal of overlap there, that's millions of people that are like following your journey as a filmmaker.
Yeah. Which is really crazy when you put it out there. Because, you know, you still come to work and, you know, every day sit down at the computer and grind out some edits and record some segments. And
you know, but like the people who like designed the first engines, like they were like in a workshop, like designing an engine, like went to work every day, and they went home and they were like talking to their families. They're like, oh yeah, Ned's out building like a thing. Like, had no idea that what they were really doing was building something that would one day like lead to air travel and then like space travel and then like intergalactic travel, right? Like the people who like change the world and create innovations that and the ripple effects of those innovations are felt throughout the corridors of history. Like they don't realize that that's what they're doing because they do what you do. You get up and you show up and you like build a team and you're having a good time doing it. Well, not always a good time doing it. Sometimes these people like they end up being abusive, but like you're not that guy. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
People are like, yeah, I work for that guy, man. He threw a thing at me. He threw the first engine prototype at me. You know? Yeah, like.
Guys, today's episode is brought to you by Storyblocks, the one-stop shop for all your stock asset needs for creators and businesses alike. Now stop and think about that for a second. Where else on the internet are you going to get a virtually unlimited library of high-quality 4K B-roll, images, audio assets, motion graphics, After Effects templates, and more, and then still be able to use it in any kind of project that you want? Now this is why Storyblocks is so good. We use them all the time over here at Corridor Digital. Through their unlimited all access plan, we can get royalty-free anything, meaning that we can download as much as we want from the site and use it in whatever kind of projects we want, whether that's a YouTube video for us, whether that's a commercial project, whether it's a project for a client. We can use their assets in those projects, however, wherever. And guess what? If you're part of a team, talk to your team leader about an enterprise plan. That will get you and your entire team integrated with Storyblocks so you guys can use it too. And so head on over to storyblocks.com/corridorcast or click the link in the description below. That's storyblocks.com/corridorcast. So huge thanks to them for sponsoring once again. They keep this podcast going. In light of that fact, let's get back to the podcast.
Yeah. You've obviously been very aware of like how media in the space of like consuming it has evolved. Could you give me the Adi Shankar version of like the past 10 years of YouTube and the eras that you've seen it go through? Maybe not just YouTube, but like consuming media. Like what are the big shifts that stood out to you?
So I don't know anything about YouTube because I don't go on YouTube. All the YouTube information I get is from you.
Okay.
Right? Like, remember when you and Sam came over to my old place, like on that rooftop, and you guys sat there and you explained to me how like Nerf videos were like a thing?
Yeah.
You're like, you should do a Nerf video. And I like was like, oh, wow. I didn't like, in terms of like, call it the mainstream content, which is like TV, film, and then it's pivot into streaming. I can address that. And I feel like there was a major delineation between the three, at least when I started off in film. Like, so there was, within the film ecosystem, you had studio movies. This was like Disney, Warner Brothers, Universal, Sony releasing movies that around, so again, we're going 10 years, so 2011. This was mainly 60 million to 200 million movies that were tentpoles, like so big blockbusters. And 10 years ago, studios still took risks with things that weren't that. So things like comedies, even, you know, like Seth Rogen making movies for Sony and Universal sometimes, Judd Apatow. That went away over time. So movies that weren't pretty much a singular thing, which is like a giant spectacle, action adventure, franchise based spectacle. They just didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So studios had to like stop making movies for like $60 million. They all became
all blockbusters.
They all became blockbusters, right?
Yeah.
And even like weird tonal things. So you couldn't really have like horror comedies, for instance, right? Like horror movies did well. Comedies did okay. But if you like kind of merge the genres, they like just never worked. They always went straight to VOD, best case scenario, straight to radio, worst case scenario.
Now, when you say never work, is that just because there just isn't an audience for those things? Or is it just because no one committed to actually trying to make a good one?
So I did make a good one, I would argue. It's called The Voices. Have you seen this movie?
I've not seen The Voices.
It stars Ryan Reynolds, Anna Kendrick. I'm in it as well.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I'm in it. I had like braces installed and I like spoke with my Indian accent. Directed by Marjan Satrapi, who's like a fantastic artist. She wrote a comic book called Persepolis. Persepolis got turned into an animated movie that was nominated for the Oscars. Sorry, I just plugged something randomly as an aside. But horror comedies don't work for three reasons. One, the United States accounts for less than 30% of a movie's revenue, especially in the independent sphere.
Yeah.
Right. So internationally, comedies don't work.
Yeah, it makes sense because there's so many like cultural references and language and
yeah. So horror movies do fine, action movies do amazing, comedies don't. So the more you infuse it with comedy, the less well it's going to do internationally. I'm talking about like the straight distribution model, right? Like going to theaters, VOD, rentals, that kind of thing. Again, the streaming thing changed it altogether, which I can get into. So back in 2011, you had the big studio system, and then you also had like the independent model that was still working, right? So this was small distributors all over the world who were trying to buy independent product to compete with the studios. So a movie like Looper, for instance, the Rian Johnson's sci-fi. You know what I'm talking about? Looper.
Yeah, Looper.
Bruce Willis is in it. Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Yep.
Looper is an independent movie.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was put together independently through distribution contracts, piecemeal together, and made. So they were like kind of scrapping together the cash to make this movie. Yeah, I mean, a lot of kind of seminal movies from that period were actually independent movies that were made outside of the studio system. So even like Magic Mike, that was an independent movie.
Interesting.
Drive, independent movie.
Wasn't the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie an independent movie?
Yes, but again, we're going back 90s. But
back
yeah,
far.
it was. Yeah, totally. And I think and then obviously TV was its own beast, right? You had like the HBO side of TV, and then you had like everything else. I think the biggest changes I have seen over the last decade within the apparatus that governs the production and distribution of content is streaming has completely rewritten all the rules, right? Because as great as it has been, it's also put a lot of those independent distributors out of business. Those little guys that were competing with Warner Brothers to try to get.
Why is that? Why would streaming put them out of business?
Because, so let's say you have an independent action movie that you've put together, right? It's you and Sam are going to direct it, and it's going to star Christian Bale.
Holy moly! Okay,
right. 10 years ago, what I would have said is like, hey, dude, what you got to do is go to like the American film market or Cannes, and sell this movie, pre-sell it to these independent distributors, and they'll give you the cash, and then you kind of scrape it together, and then get your movie out there. You can get it made and then get it, distributed and premiered at a film festival. And I'm going like very inside baseball here.
It's great. I love it. I love inside baseball.
Yeah, you do? Okay,
yeah.
Good. The problem is those are exclusive contracts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when Netflix is not a US thing, it's an international thing. It's a worldwide thing, right? So when you do a deal with Netflix, it's a worldwide deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They don't want those strings attached, right? Of like limitations with various territories and things like that. They just give it to us.
They're like, we want it day and date, released worldwide. So if you have a contract with Metropolitan in France, which is like the big independent distributor in France,
mm-hmm.
They want you to not have that deal.
Yeah. So you're kind of stuck. Basically, you sell it to Netflix, or you commit to having to get everything from independent distributors.
Yes.
And then,
or you could do something, kind of odd, or not odd. Like, there are some movies still that where it'll be on Netflix in the US, but internationally it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But The Irishman is a good example of this.
Like
the Irishman was pieced together through this model.
Okay.
And then Netflix came in and just was like, dude, get rid of all these international distribution deals. Like, what the fuck? And then it became a Netflix movie.
So this pressure from, streaming platforms like Netflix to pull people just to make one big deal has basically kind of taken away the life support of these independent distributors and basically they've dried up.
Yes. And also, it's changed the value of content,
mm-hmm.
right? So if you go back to 2004, your first run would be the theater, right?
Mm-hmm.
The theater would do something. Worst case scenario, best case scenario, it's a giant hit and everyone's happy. Worst case scenario, it proves to be marketing for the DVD. And there was an entire life cycle for a movie, because you could kind of look at a movie as almost like an asset.
Mm-hmm.
I sound like a fucking business guy.
You are a business guy.
Am I?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm more of a crazy artist.
Yeah, but you're doing it still, and that means you had to make a business out of it.
I really have not made a business out of it. What I've done is I can explain how the business works, but I don't follow any of this shit. I'm more of like a student of the game, so I understand. So I've studied film history.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, well, this is interesting. How did it evolve the way it evolved? And then I studied the business of film, and then you see how they kind of worked part and parcel together, and they to create the ecosystem we exist in.
Right. Well, I think you've always understood the importance of understanding the environment you're trying to put a product out into if you don't get to control the means of distribution yourself.
And I'm obsessed with understanding how things work and why they work the way they work, and how did the thing become the way it is. Because, sure, it evolves by chance, but there is a lineage to
how you got there.
To how it got there, exactly. What was I just saying before I just interrupted myself? I'm not a fucking business guy.
We were talking about the how movie's like an asset and you had a whole life cycle you could go through.
Right, sure. So exactly. So the movie had an entire life cycle that it could go through. So it goes, theater, DVD, pay TV, free TV, VOD, and it was just kind of going through this entire life cycle. Now it just kind of is almost one and done with streaming.
Does that mean there's less money?
Yes.
Okay.
So movies are worth less. So it's kind of so I said it's an asset. So imagine it's a house, right? So imagine 20 years ago, there were 10 ways to monetize a house.
Right. Like you could rent it out. You could use it as a showroom. You could use it as
also, there was something below the house that was generating minerals that you could sell. You could also use it as a garden to grow fruits, and and every house followed this model. And then all of a sudden, the internet comes in and goes, okay, there's one way to monetize it now, and that's it. So every piece of content is now worth less.
So how has this affected your approach to making stuff then?
It hasn't at all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it hasn't affected me at all because
Okay. But I feel like because now you only have like one way of making something. Well, here's the thing.
It's helped me actually. This has helped me. This has helped me. All these things have helped me tremendously.
Oh.
Because there was a business machine that existed that governed what got made and didn't get made and how it got made and how much it should cost and what everyone got paid. It kind of, there was a machine behind it, and the machine, what I'm really trying to say is the machine was falling apart before the streaming wars started. And then the streaming wars started really showing the cracks in the machine, and then the pandemic just completely, it was like Stallone coming in with a knife being like, ugh, and like, so,
do you think theaters are dead?
No.
No?
No. I think the theaters are dead to the extent, like, so I want to differentiate between the theaters as in like the theatrical experience, like actually the theatrical experience, not what filmmakers call the theatrical experience, where you're like, what the fuck is this experience? Like the popcorn sucks, like there's someone talking, like parking's a nightmare. I mean, like the actual act of going to a big screen and the communal aspect of it versus the business model, which is like AMC and these conglomerates that have made the theatrical experience what it is, which is basically shuttling people in and out of these dark rooms, and
charge $15 a pop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't think the theatrical experience is dead. In fact, I think the death of AMC is going to allow it to evolve the way it should have evolved 10 years ago.
Interesting.
Right? Because these things need to actually be an experience, right? It can't just be Christopher Nolan being like, the theatrical experience is sacred. It's like, okay, I guess, but like they're doing a really bad job of it, right? Like,
yeah, it's like I do enjoy watching The Dark Knight at my home also.
Right. No, but imagine, and there was legislation going back decades ago that prevented movie studios from owning theaters.
That's right.
In the US. It's not like that everywhere. Like, so in Korea, the entire film ecosystem is vertically integrated. We're talking about like one company will own the theaters, make the content, manage the talent, develop the material. And the theatrical experience has not gone away in Korea. Like Korea is South Korea. I don't know about North Korea. I haven't been there. I can't speak to it. But the theatrical
North Korea just has like a banging like $200 million Marvel competitor that we've never seen because it's like completely locked in the country.
Totally. And it's just made specifically for Mr.
Kim Jong-un
Mr.
or
Un.
whatever?
Mr. Un.
Mr. Un.
I was gonna say Mr. Ill, but no, it's Mr. Un now. So what was I saying?
South Korea has vertically
integrated. They vertically integrated it all, and the theater thing is still a thing there. It never there's no debate like, oh, is it gonna come back? Like, it's been a thing, and it hasn't stopped being a thing. But I think once I seem really anti-conglomerate. Maybe I am. But once the conglomerates go out of business, their business model will have to change. And now that the law has been repealed,
oh really?
That doesn't allow movie studios to own theaters. I could see someone like Disney coming in and starting their own theater chain.
I feel like it's just like extra premium Disney Plus is to like go to the Disney theater.
I mean, they make experiences, right?
And
that's what
true.
Disneyland is.
Parks, they have cruises.
The cruises, right? So it's not hard to imagine a theater that's not really even a theater anymore. It's a full experience that you go in to experience a bunch of stuff, and then you go watch the next Avengers movie. And the whole thing's a curated thing. It's not, would you like some popcorn? It's it's a full thing. I could see Amazon pulling a similar move. Like, the point is, the movie theater is going to evolve into something else.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll look back as old people and go, oh yeah, that used to be a movie theater. The business model around it and the fact that movie studios and the theater owners, which they operated like the theater owners, they operated like a cartel.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird. They're like, they had an ungodly amount of power.
Yeah.
That's what no one's talking about. Like, it's not like the theatrical experience is gone away because of the internet. It's like this geriatric ward of, oh man, I'm literally burning bridges. It just kind of kept it from, they kept it stagnant. They kept it from evolving, right? Because it was all about like, how do we increase our profit margins?
Right.
Let me ask you a question.
Hit me.
You're Disney.
Okay.
You make an Iron Man movie.
Mm-hmm.
You put it in a theater.
Mm-hmm.
The movie makes $1.
Oh, crap.
What percentage of that $1 does the theater keep? And what percentage of the $1 comes to you?
If it only makes $1?
Just period. $1 hypothetically.
My recollection is that the theater keeps half of it.
Yes. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Like, if you made a shoe and you put the shoe in Nordstrom, Nordstrom doesn't keep half of the shoe.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense.
So, when I look at the history of the film business, so much of it, because of how complicated and costly it is to make art, there's been a litany of middle people that have made it more and more difficult to make things outside the box because of, all these people taking a cut. So everything just becomes more and more risky.
Yeah, I mean, if theaters are taking half, like let's say you do a $200 million Marvel movie, like you need to pull in $400 million right there just to actually make your budget back. But then there's marketing, which is also a chunk. So now you're hitting $600 million before you break even, more.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's why when you go back to 2011, 2012, and you're like, why did they all become blockbusters? Like, why did movie genres just fucking go away, right? When you look back at like classics from our childhood, like Back to the Future, would that get made? No, fuck no, that would not get made. Yeah. Would the Goonies get made? No, fuck no, because it's like kids, like anything kind of like a little offbeat went away.
Yeah.
And it went away because of this. Because you're like, okay, if you're making something and you're minimum having to spend $40 million to market it, more likely north of 100, and then this, and then this, and this, and this, it forces everybody to start homogenizing what they're doing, because you can't take risks at that point.
Don't actors also have like requirements, like you're going to spend this much money marketing with my face attached to it and stuff like that?
Not really.
No.
Just a few people had that back in the day. Not really. And really the other big trend that I've experienced is actors, movie stars have gone away and have lost clout.
I've noticed that too.
Like, it's been like kind of a nosedive, like a free fall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like Brad Pitt, George Clooney, Tom Cruise, like I feel like that's the end of the movie star era to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have younger actors, but I mean, heck, even now, like Marvel films, maybe only 10% of like the actual population of the country, 15% actually know who Iron Man is or Thor or Captain America. Mm-hmm. Or even said, Robert Downey Jr. plays, they'd be like, Batman, like if you got beyond that. But like, we feel like there's such big cultural things versus like 40 years ago, like when movies came out, they were cultural touchstones where everybody knew about it because there was only one avenue versus so many these days.
Yeah. I could. So like 40 years ago, movies didn't get international distribution with the level of efficiency that they do today.
Mm-hmm.
So you're speaking with a little bit of selection bias as an American.
Oh, yeah, right? You're right.
Right?
It didn't occur to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you just couldn't get everything into every country. Like countries had like blockades.
That's right. Were they all, like, there's a lot of like cultural protections around countries too.
What you could and couldn't show, like, so again, there's a selection bias, but also there's just, to your point, so much media, just straight up media, that every piece of it becomes less important, but as a whole, it's having a greater impact than ever before.
Interesting.
So every piece of it matters less, but as a whole, it's more influential than it's ever been.
Yeah. This is one of the things I noticed with like films coming out on Netflix versus like when a movie, like we're pretty close to the same age, if not the same age. And
How old are you?
35.
36, so yeah, same age.
Yeah, I turned 36 next month.
I've asked you this so many times.
Yeah. But we grew up in a very like, I think it was the golden age of movies, at least as we know movies, you know, as the late 80s and 90s.
That's nostalgia, dude.
You think so?
Yeah.
I feel like the way is like, I feel like at that point they had kind of refined the art form and perfected it from the previous 30 to 40 to 50 years and kind of really had dialed it into something that, you know, would really hit hard emotionally. And then the way the market was supporting it with all the money that was going into it and how culturally relevant they were, I just felt like there's a lot of big stuff getting made. And there's still big things getting made, but
yeah,
the observation that I've seen now is like when you have, say, a movie that hits Netflix, in about 1 month, it's off the front page and it's completely forgotten. Whereas, you know, if a movie came out and you went to Blockbuster Video to go rent it, like that movie would be on the shelves and you'd walk by it year after year after year. And, you know, granted the crappy movies that no one remembered, those would fall away. Sure.
At the same time, I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying, but again, there's a degree of selection bias here going on. There's one, there was just fewer movies, period.
Right.
So, you know, it's not like Titanic came out and then all of a sudden you have like 40 other boat movies that are competing with it, you know?
Yeah.
And that's a big one. There's just more content. There's just more stuff. Two, I don't feel like the art form of filmmaking, like the people who do it, and it's going to happen, right? There'll be someone who truly breaks out from the digital age, but no one's quite figured out the streaming of it all. Like how to make something that like resonates with a streaming audience in a way that creates that Back to the Future,
right?
Kind of
or just
seminal,
like, yeah, just like harmonizes with like a part of your life,
right?
Yeah.
No one's quite figured that out, and it's because of what you were saying earlier, which is, hey, these streaming platforms, they started like this, they expanded rapidly, and then they needed to fill the content vacuum, the endless content vacuum. So they went and hired for the most part, like the old TV film people, right? The people that were making like NBC shows and Law and Order and that kind of thing. But it'll be people not even our age. I think it's people younger, like the TikTok generation, that come in and create something that like you're like, you know, where Scorsese gets really mad. He's like, this is not cinema. And like people are like, who are you again? You know, and then
it's like, I made The Irishman. It's like, oh, right.
Right.
One video on
the
Netflix.
Movie with the really bad deep fake. He's like, it wasn't a deep fake, damn it. So yeah, I think, and also, if you talk to people that were like seminal filmmakers of the 90s, they were sitting there having the same conversation you and I are having about how much better it was in the 70s, where they gonna grow up, right? Because in the 70s, like the independents were truly independent. The studios had just given up because their shit was not working. And it wasn't until the 80s when corporate America came in and started acquiring Hollywood. So they were complaining about the corporatization of Hollywood, right? So all these seminal movies that affected us
we're all the corporate.
We're corporate products, right?
Yeah.
I mean, E.T. is a corporate product. Like Spielberg and Lucas, like they are innovators in corporate filmmaking. They created the blueprint that lasted for 30 plus years of corporate filmmaking. Like, how do you make something that touches you emotionally, doesn't offend? You know, again, that's not a knock. That they, again, innovators.
Right. Yeah.
But it was we're looking at it with rose-colored glasses because that's our childhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the experience that we had. And here's the thing. I'm saying all this to say that the next generation, the seminal things that influence them are not Netflix streaming shows. It's your stuff. It's your stuff. Like literally they're watching you and your journey as a filmmaker and the videos you put out, and they're like, I want to do that.
That's interesting.
You know, I met I think I was mentioning this to you outside. I made a friend in Dubai, Abdullah, who religiously follows you guys, like loves you guys. I'm going to connect you guys via email because he's a great, very good dude. Much younger than me, much younger than us. But he was talking about you, not even knowing that we were friends, that we are friends.
Okay.
He was talking about you with the same level of reverence that someone from our age demographic would talk about James Cameron, or like a seminal filmmaker who made seminal content, right? And I think our selection bias tends to be, for our age group, it's like, okay, if it's 90 minutes, that it's real art. If it's 2, but that's selection bias.
Yeah.
Because we are judging what we make against and using the past that we grew up in as a litmus test to judge the present. But the past literally doesn't exist. I mean, the 90s does not exist. So you are a seminal filmmaker of today.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. That makes me feel good.
And I'm just, a guy who pontificates.
Pontius. That's cool. There's one pontification that you had that like blew my mind. And it's obvious now when you look back at it, but it was that shift that happened when Vine went belly up.
Yes.
And how that totally changed YouTube and the space that at least that Sam and I were in.
Right.
And the rest of the corridor team at the time. It went from, because YouTube was very filmmaker centric for a while.
Totally.
And then suddenly it became, personality. Personality is not quite the right term because, we had personalities
became
too.
antic-driven.
Antic-driven.
Yeah.
Where it's like, it was all like the characters from reality TV shows realizing that they didn't need to have a crappily edited reality TV show to get people to pay attention to how loud they were.
Right.
And that like totally shifted the focus away from, I think to a certain, not completely, but it shifted the focus away from creating something to being something and filming yourself doing it.
Right.
And like when you pointed out that shift and how when Vine went down and all the Viners moved over to YouTube, it entirely shifted the YouTube ecosystem. The algorithm wasn't ready for it that they had, in place. And suddenly that is what YouTube became. And it's still, I don't want to say struggles. It's not quite the right word, but it still struggles with that identity a little bit and trying to evolve out of it.
Interesting. I don't feel like it struggles at all. I feel like, what is their slogan? Broadcast yourself.
Yeah. Oh, they embraced it 100%, I guess.
I think this is, this is what we are, right?
Yeah.
Because look, there was like you guys, right? Clinton, who worked here. Freddie Wong. Right? There were a few people out there making art. Now, did the mainstream media view it as art? I don't know. I viewed it as art, right? That shit's gone. Like you're left standing because you built a business around what you were doing. And the business thrives, right? And that business kind of operates in a vacuum away from the tyranny of the YouTube incentive structure.
Yeah.
Or algorithm. But if you're a corporate entity, and again, I don't want to sound like a conspiracy kind of anti-corporate guy, but if you're a corporate entity, it's kind of safer to have these personalities running around.
How so?
It's not that special. it's special to the extent that like it does take inertia to get up and vlog and film yourself and come up with antics and build. So it's not without difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
But anyone can do it.
As long as you got the personality for it.
Exactly. And the tools to capture it.
Right.
And the tools are readily available. They become more democratically available every day, as you're finding out, as we're all finding out.
Yeah.
What you do is a little more nuanced.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Right? But I think what has been really like incredible about what you guys have built is I think I mentioned this to you as a negative. I'm like, oh, like this fucking thing. And you guys went off and went like, yeah, like let's turn our entire engine into a reality show.
Mm-hmm.
And that it became a key driver of audience retention for you.
Mm-hmm.
I literally sound like I have a fucking like a business degree. Right? I don't know what are you doing to me, dude? Like key driver of audience retention? What the fuck? Like I don't even know what that means, but it makes sense when I say it out loud, right? Yeah. Fuck. But
those are the insights that you always have. You downplay it. You've always had like a very good insight into like the game. You know, it's the game around all these things. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, like the rules of the game are simple.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's at least for the rules as I understand them is make something good to yourself. At least it doesn't need to be. You know, good is very subjective, but do your best. Try to make a point with something. Try to make it special. Try to make people feel something. AKA, go out there and try to make art. And then make sure there's a way for people to access it. And you got to get their attention to look at it. But beyond that, that's it. Those are the rules of the game. Go out there, make something, put it out there, make sure people can notice it, and let them notice it. And then just keep doing it. You know, it's not about doing it once and then be like, that was it. You know, wipe my hands,
and
walk
it's not
away.
about spending 6.5 years doing it, for, you know, making one thing for 6.5 years while your buddy makes an entire media conglomerate.
Which we'll get into that in a second. But yeah, you know, it's just, you have to be okay with doing it every day.
Right.
And you just have to be true to yourself to some extent. And that's it. You know, those are the rules of the game. But, you know, you talk about like building something that's a little bit different than the rest on YouTube, and like not to take the spotlight away from the guest on our podcast, but I do want to talk about that for just a second. Because there is, you know, observing my friends that have been in YouTube, but also just like other YouTubers and, you know, the business people in YouTube. I think the one thing that like, there's a couple things that we strive to do with Corridor, priority wise, that I think made it so we could be a little bit of that outlier. And that was, you know, first one is building a good team and having a team of artists that, you know, you respect, but they're also, you acknowledge that they are individuals in and of themselves with their own strengths and their own powers and, you know, the things that make them special. And, you know, when you join up as a team, it's so that person can do what they do best.
Yeah, so you're like Voltron, not like Rita Repulsa, like, you know, sending in minions that don't have a mind of their own. They get their ass kicked. Yeah.
Yep. And at any point, what that does, it takes all the pressure off of you. Well, not all the pressure, but it takes a lot of pressure off you because something fails somewhere, somebody has an issue, like the rest of the team is independently strong and can like keep lifting this entity.
Right.
You know, the other thing that we really tried to focus on was not like... Everybody in the tech world grows really big first and they worry about profits second. And instead we tried to worry about profits from day one, where it's like, you make $10, spend 5, you make $20, spend 10. It's like, don't spend more money than you have. Don't grow faster than you are growing. Just one step at a time. In a couple of years, you'll get there, but just one step at a time. Yeah. And so we tried to be just very careful so that we were never in a spot where we were getting pinched. And we were never having to chase profits, you know, because like we grow so fast. Okay, everybody, now we got to make some money. Like that wasn't how we ever had to operate.
Right.
And then the third one was like to never forget why you're doing it in the first place. You know, I didn't start making videos because I wanted to make money. You know, obviously I want to make a living making my videos, but I'm not here to get rich, right? I'm here to make videos. And as long as I have enough money to live and support myself and have a comfortable lifestyle, that's all I need. and then I'm cool going out there and making videos with the rest of it.
Right.
And like, I think that speaks to a truth in the art that you pursue. It's like,
totally.
If you could make, let's say you're making $100,000 a year as your salary, and you could go out and you could make, $10 million a year with your salary, but you had to make, kids videos, you had to make kids cartoons. And, sorry, like, let's pretend that you hate making kids cartoons, right? Because obviously there's people out there who are great with kids. I'm not trying to rag on them, but let's pretend you hate making kids cartoons.
Some of them are creepy, but sure.
Like, I really just want to make kids cartoons, and that's my dream.
Like those guys.
And some people would be like, yeah, screw it, let's go do it. It's like, I'm just going to grind it out for a couple of years and I'm retire and that'll be my thing. Whereas like our direction was like, no, let's just keep doing the things we want to do. And even in the years where YouTube's like not rewarding that, it's like, it's cool. Let's just keep doing the things we want to do because that's why we're here. And those years will pass, new years will come. And I think this really kept us from burning out. It's kept us happy. And, I think it's the reason why we're still here 10 years down the line.
Totally.
We were doing a little talk with like one of our YouTube people that helps us kind of like analyze things. And when the conversation started, they'd been looking at the Corridor channel because they didn't know we had a Corridor Crew channel yet. They had just come in on the like, oh, okay, Corridor, that's your channel. Let's take a look at it. They're like, it's a really strange channel for YouTube. It's you guys only upload like 4 times a year. But you have like 9 million subscribers. You don't have any personality stuff. You don't do any live streams. You don't have any subscriptions. You don't have any. And we're like, yeah, that's because the channel is just where we put our short films that we're passionate about. Yeah. And that's what we've been doing for a decade,
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about,
You don't chase trends.
Right. I'm aware of them.
You're totally aware of the trends, which is brilliant, right? Like, like the time you were like, hey man, Nerf videos are in. And I'm like,
right.
I had a whole idea for like an ultra violent Nerf video. And then I like just didn't make it. Cause like, but yeah, you don't chase trends and you're not making widgets.
Right.
Which, a friend of mine, I have like a lot of like really like old men as friends, right? We've talked about this.
Yep.
Yeah. So one of my friends, he passed away earlier this year. He was like a innovator. I mean, he produced an album for the Beatles, right? So this is how.
Wow. So
he's old school.
Yeah.
One of the first piece of advice he told me, which is just exactly what you said. He's like, if you're going to make widgets, and widgets are just kind of basic instruments that are just something basic, like go make something basic. Don't do this. If you're going to do this, do what you're passionate about. And that's what you do.
Yeah.
And I think when you explained the profit thing to me, I was like, holy shit, you're totally right. I was doing a similar thing on a different wavelength, right? Because in my experience, filmmakers are so eager to get that blockbuster. It's like, man, can you imagine what will happen if I get $200 million to make a movie? And you're like, yes, I can imagine. You won't get $200 million to make a movie. You will get a committee making a movie that you are like the scapegoat for. That's what will happen. But yeah, when you said that, I was like, me and this dude that's when I knew we would be kind of friends for a very, very long time. Because I was like, we are totally on the same wavelength.
Yeah.
And you also once explained to me how you had grown in dealing with your editors in-house. And how you got really good at, like, it's kind of a nuance between explaining what you want, but also giving them the creative freedom to do that, but not letting that become, because that's a boundary thing, right? Because at a certain point, there's like, it's a balancing act, because you don't want people just kind of like shitting on your vision, but also kind of getting their stuff in also.
Right.
When you explained that to me I think we were at Cafe Gratitude.
That's right.
I was like, oh, holy shit. Because, like, I'm not great at communicating sometimes. Actually, a lot of times. I'm, like, fucking terrible at communicating. Or I used to be. Gotten better.
Nice.
Like, I couldn't have done this podcast, like, I don't know, 2 years ago.
Takes practice. And a lot of
there was something
self-reflection.
weird going on with like my mind-mouth connection where I used to take like really long pauses, and I still probably do, but yeah. And I also just wasn't comfortable with how I looked.
Mm-hmm. How did you approach that? Like, how did you reflect on that and then grow from it?
From which part?
Both, like, you know, trying to become a better communicator, but also becoming more comfortable with just who you are and how you look and all that. Am I making an assumption when I say you're more comfortable?
No, I am.
Okay.
I am. So I didn't really have a lot of, I mean, I had self-awareness in some degree, but then in some ways, like I had zero self-awareness,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like, I think I mentioned, like I'm friends with a lot of like professional athletes and wrestlers and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't understand that I'm kind of like a Pixar character. I'm like kind of a nerd.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like, I didn't understand that I'm kind of like a funny person, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like I thought I was supposed to be like Stone Cold.
Okay. Stone Cold Steve Austin or Stone Cold as
Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
I didn't get it. And it was actually, do you know who Diamond Dallas Page is?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Diamond Dallas
DDP
Page.
once was like, bro, you literally don't motherfucking see yourself. You have no idea who the fuck you are. And once you figure it out, watch out. And I'm like, what is he talking
Man,
about?
I didn't know he was so wise.
Dude, DDP's like super wise. He's like, that's why me and him are like homies. He's like very wise.
That's super cool.
He's like a Yoda like figure. And also Kanye West. Remember when I was that window when me and Kanye would hang out?
Mm-hmm.
Remember that? Kanye really helped me with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kanye helped me I grew leaps and bounds just from his advice and stuff
What
like
was
that.
his advice for you?
So there's a few things. Like, so one was, so you know how I wear face paint and I run around, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm playing a character. I'm being authentic right now because we're friends, but I was like uncomfortable being myself because I didn't know who I was necessarily. And, you know, I moved around every 2 to 2.5 years as a kid. So when you're like a little kid moving between not just different cities, but different countries, different civilizations, right? Like by the time I was like 13, I'd lived in like 8 different places, different languages and stuff like that. So everything just feels very confusing and discombobulated to you. And you develop this pattern where you're constantly people pleasing because you have to assimilate very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes you a little kind of thing. But when I would wear the makeup, I would play a character kind of like a wrestler would. And I felt very comfortable in the character because I knew who the character was.
Mm-hmm.
So he sat me down, Kanye, and was like, you're playing a character like me. Like Kanye West is a character. And, you know, I'd never had an adult say that break it down for me like that before. Right.
Yeah.
So that was just huge. Just being able to kind of like talk intellectually with someone really about what was going on for me, which is I was so scared to be myself. I had to be this other thing because I didn't know if I'd be accepted as me because I subconsciously didn't accept me because I didn't look like the people around me. I didn't talk like the people around me. I had different world views than people around me. That was a byproduct of just being from all these different places. So that was super helpful. And then the craziest thing was, and this whole thing was super surreal. So I had a really bad time in high school because I was living in Hong Kong. Hong Kong got handed over It was part of Great Britain and then got handed over into China.
Mm-hmm.
Junior year, my parents moved me to a school in Rhode Island. So it was like super preppy. I went there. I moved to America by myself when I was 16.
Oh, wow.
And then 2 days later, 9/11 happened.
Oh, man.
And I was like the only person that looked like me in the vicinity, right? And
no.
So I didn't have a good time in high school, but this was, I didn't, I didn't know why. I'm just like, I remember having a really bad time in high school.
Mm.
A lot of like anger and resentment as well. And then we had our 15-year reunion coming up. So this is like, a few years ago, 15-year reunion. And I got an email from the school saying, hey, are you coming to the reunion? Because we'd love to have you talk to the students about your work and stuff like that. So like acknowledgement's cool.
Mm-hmm.
My first reaction though was like, this is like Get Out. This is all a ploy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is going to be some fucking thing. And I got like kind of douchey about it, to be perfectly honest, but I didn't know, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I said yes, right? So I go to this reunion, which ended up being amazing. It was an awesome experience. I realized how much of this narrative I created around this place was just a narrative given where I was emotionally at that point in time because of, leaving again, going to another country, another community, just very dissimilar from my own. It wasn't like international the way it was used to. It was very kind of small town, and homogenous. And I wasn't part of the homogenous amoeba, so I felt even more like an outcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to talk to the kids about that, which was really, really interesting, right? And I saw the faculty was it was bizarre because it felt like I was in a movie or a TV show about a guy, right? Because it was crazy because I was like literally going to this place that I'd like built a narrative around, and everyone was just happy to see me. They were like happy I was there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They were like, "Oh man, this is so amazing that you're back!" Like, and I hadn't stepped foot on this campus since the day I graduated. And so as I'm on stage speaking, Kanye called me, and this was the week that he had that famous meltdown where he went on TMZ and said a bunch of stuff, and everyone was mad at him. So he called me to talk about that because he was like, so I'm like looking at my phone and I'm like, guys, I just 1 sec. I need to go talk to a friend. And then I finished my talk, went outside, sat on the floor, called him back. And we had this whole conversation where I thought he was calling to ask, I don't know what, like my thoughts on what the whole thing happened and the TMZ meltdown and whatnot. But really, he just was like asking me about how the high school reunion was. And I'm like, yeah, it's okay. Yeah, it's good. And then he starts yelling at me. He's like, you are not in touch with your feelings. You're in your head. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, what is this fucking guy talking about? And then I found out at the end of the year, he was absolutely right. Like, I think I had so much trauma as a kid from moving and like, you make a friend and then you move. Like when you're 5 years old or 3 or 7 or 9,
yeah, it's goodbye forever.
It's traumatic. Goodbye forever. There's no internet. You're not going to see these people again. So I was like emotionally very disconnected from my entire life. And that made it hard for me to talk because I was intellectualizing everything. Sorry, I told this whole Kanye story, but it was like very, very insightful, right? Because like no one had said that to me that directly before, right? Because if anything, I was praised for my intellect. Like, in school and college,
right.
Post thing, like the opportunities I got right off the bat to work on like these big studio movies and just do it always came because I was saying, quote, smart stuff. So I was being rewarded for being emotionally disconnected and completely in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know, to the point where I didn't know that there was another way to exist.
That's really, I mean, I think that's really fascinating stuff. And I appreciate you sharing that story. You know, it's high school, like, not to take too big of a tangent just on high school, but it's one of those things that, like, you're in it and it's the biggest deal in the world, right? Like, high school is the most important thing to you when you are in high school.
Right.
And then, like, within a couple of years, once you're out of high school, you're like, oh, that was just a blip in my life. It's just a moment, you know? For people, it can be very, like, formative, but still, it's like, looking back on it now, it's like, let's just say a 3 to 4 year stretch out of, you know, so many 3 to 4 year stretches. And it does not, like, define you.
I don't have that experience.
Yeah?
Yeah. Because schooling for me was very consistent. As in, if you're there for 2 years, you go to the same place. That repetition, the people around, right? Like, I feel divorced of community as an adult because everything's constantly changing. The world's changing. I mean, even think of, like, how many new words society has invented in the last 5 years. It's more than the last 1,000 years before it, right?
Yeah.
So things are changing at such a rapid pace. To me, school is a callback to a simpler time of consistency of repetition.
It's also
But sorry.
I was just gonna say, it's also the only time you're ever forced to be in the same building with literally everybody in the population that's the same age as you. I mean, obviously within a certain radius, but like, there's not another moment in your life where you will be with every other person that lives in your city or your town that's your age. And so you're forced to be with everybody.
Yes. I also didn't understand that, like, people in this school thought I was cool.
Yeah.
I didn't get it because I you know, I was like, I just kind of like corner people and, you know, I'd be like, what did you think of me when like, how did you perceive me? And they would tell me, and I'm like, what the fuck? That's, like, not how I thought anyone perceived me.
Yeah. I think
but I think that's so much of your childhood is, like, your mental state casting a shadow and making, like, these sweeping assumptions, or at least if you're an artist, like, making these sweeping assumptions on how things work.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily, like, reality distortion amongst young people. It has to be a thing, because at least it was for me.
Oh, I'm sure it's even worse now when you have, I mean, we now live in a world where you have two personas. You have your online persona and your offline persona. You know, your real you and the presented you.
Right.
So, you know, it's probably, that whole reality distortion thing's probably even worse than it was back when we didn't have any smartphones in our pockets.
Or your PUBG persona.
Or a PUBG persona.
Or a Fortnite persona.
Yeah.
If you like to dance.
my Twitch persona.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, taking a little turn here to a different conversation. You've been working on a project for about 6.5 years.
Yeah.
We even helped you out a little bit with it.
Not even a little, dude. You're a fucking second unit director, man.
Heck yeah. Thanks to Addy here.
Yeah, no, it was actually in large part inspired by the work you were doing.
Thanks.
You know, it was inspired by I mean, the list of people that kind of inspired this is kind of eclectic, because it's like John Carpenter, Paul Verhoeven, Oliver Stone, Niko.
Look at that company.
You laugh because you don't see how innovative you are.
Oh man, you're making me
but
blush.
you are in that pantheon of great filmmakers. Yeah, 6.5 fucking years, man.
Guardians of Justice.
Guardians of Justice.
How openly can we talk about this?
Well, I mean, I guess it premiered at Cannes, a few hours ago.
Oh, hey.
Yeah.
Damn.
So it literally premiered at fucking Cannes series, which is the series iteration of Cannes.
It's gotta feel
is
good.
Crazy. Yep. It's crazy because, I mean, it's not a superhero show. It uses superheroes as a motif.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to make a superhero show. I wanted to make something else. But it's crazy because, you know, Cannes is very off. This is seemingly very off-brand for Cannes.
Yeah, you
know?
usually think of like Wes Anderson movies when you think of Cannes.
Like dramas about people losing cats, or not even losing cats. Like, you know, just like kind of deep emotional.
It's like, this is my life as a 60-year-old who likes wine. You know, it's like,
right, that kind of thing. And you win awards and like, and I'm like, what the fuck? We're in Cannes, and the artistic director wrote like the kindest thing about the series. Yeah, the reception's been crazy good, which is weird because I spent years, one, judging myself, and two, feeling judged, and three, probably being judged.
Yeah.
You know, people were definitely
does.
judging me. They're like, dude, this guy went off the fucking rails, man. In his 20s, he was like doing movies with Brad Pitt, and now in this fucking, what the fuck?
Yeah.
You know?
So Guardians of Justice, you know, I'm going to take a shot at describing it, and then you should actually describe it after I take my weird shot. But I feel like it's a culmination of the bootleg universe idea, which I think it's been something that's stuck with you for a long time.
Yes.
I think that's one of those things where it's like, that's a bug that's going to be nibbling at you forever.
Yeah.
For sure. In the bootleg universe, I feel like, to back up there, is you wanting to, as a filmmaker and as an artist, you wanting to add to this world of cultural icons, or even just like mythological icons at this point, that define the stories that we know. You know, it's like, you know, like Luke Skywalker, right? It's a mythological figure to me. And like, if I'm going to tell stories, part of it's going to be inspired by Luke Skywalker. In fact, I might even want a Luke Skywalker-like character, but we live in this weird world with like IP and copyrights. You can't just have Luke Skywalker being your thing. And so Guardians of Justice is kind of your way to take a lot of these motifs, things that have inspired you, the different characters, the style of stories that surround this, and be able to step into this world and kind of quickly get past some of these basics that you'd have to deal with otherwise, and then get to start playing with these building blocks and doing new interesting things with them.
Yep.
Is that accurate, kind of?
It's accurate. I feel like that's accurate, totally accurate, and a fair way to describe it. If you're a fan of me and haven't just been introduced to me as a result of this podcast, it's a slight pivot from my previous stuff, and I think it'll cause all of it to be viewed in a different light. Because, and I think on some level, I realized what I was doing with the bootleg universe, right? Because I wasn't trying to do accurate interpretations of Power Rangers. It's like I actively loved the show as a kid, and I realized, like, when I watched Blood Diamond, like, oh, this is the same story. It's like here they're like, you know, weaponizing kids and giving them guns, and they're weaponizing kids and giving them guns. It's like the same shit. So, you know, and I realized, like, as an outsider, I have like this outsider's perspective because I am a perpetual outsider, having grown up in not one place, in not one society, not one community. So it's that outsider perspective. I love how I'm playing with my hair out of nervousness when I talk about it. And I think like the big thing about this project is it's, you know, do you remember the movie The Wizard? Fred Savage.
Is that the one that the Nintendo Power Glove?
Okay, it's like a Nintendo commercial, but like,
Yep.
So I watched that when I was like 6.
Okay.
In Hong Kong. And I was like, where's this movie set? I need to go there. And they're like, oh, it's in America. And I'm like, oh my God. And I like literally would go to sleep every day and like pray to go to America. Because I was like, oh my God, I want to go to America. And I tell my parents, like, when can we go to America? There's this place called America. And my parents are like, yeah, we know what it is.
We're aware.
And then I got to go to America. Got to come to LA. And see it. And it didn't disappoint. I mean, when I like turned on the TV, it was like amazing. You had like, you know, pro wrestling, you had all cartoons and amazing toy commercials and like pizza houses where they had like fucking arcade machines, and everything was super violent, but they were like marketing it to kids, which was awesome. And it was like, so this project is me taking all those experiences of how I viewed America as a kid and kind of transmuting it into a project, which is why it took so long. And also, this is kind of weird, but my memory plays out in animation.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That is interesting.
It's weird. I didn't realize that this was unique to me, or I'm sure it's not unique to me. I'm sure other people are like this too. But I had no idea that this was not the norm until I asked someone and so the project is like, it's kind of, would you say it has a kind of a crazy pacing and a crazy...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not in a bad way. Not crazy as in like, I can't follow, but crazy in the sense that like, oh, here's somebody that's entirely not worrying about conventions and is just going to tell you the story and get to the point, you know?
Yeah. So the show is how I see the world. And that's kind of what like being in my head is like.
Okay. And do you think that's why it took so long? It's just because you had to, because personally speaking, like trying to articulate things that are ethereal blobs in your mind usually takes a couple tries before you even get anywhere close to what you're actually going for.
And I lacked the vocabulary to explain what I was trying to do. I literally did not have the sentences to say, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. Like, remember when I showed you guys, like a few years ago, I showed you guys something and Sam was like, oh, this is interesting. You're using abstract editing. I'm like, what? What was that? Was that what you said? And I like made a note and I'm like, I want abstract editing. And like, still no one knew what that meant. But it's like, until I had something to actively show that was final, you're just kind of like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
And like, it's just not a superhero show. And I think that's the kind of the joke of it. Because there are people who worked on it who literally think, oh, I worked on this superhero show. And they're going to watch it and be like, oh.
Yeah. So why would you not define it as a superhero show? I mean, you got superheroes in it. It's a superhero show, right?
It's not about superheroes. It's like people dressed as superheroes, but that's about it. That's about it. I mean, there is a kind of a superhero storyline in it that just ends very quickly. It's just not. It's I think thematically the inspiration was Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove.
Oh, interesting.
And like, I didn't know how to explain, again, lacking the vocabulary, like I didn't know how to explain to the people who were working on it. Like they thought that they were working on a live action, dark, dramatic series, right? But I needed everyone to believe that because that's how you get the performances.
Right.
You get what I'm saying here? Because you've seen it, like the tonal.
Yeah, you need, I mean, if you want actors to like give you dark, serious performances, you need to tell them that's a dark and serious piece.
Right.
Like, no, this is actually a meta commentary on like this. Like, no, you lose your actor instantly.
No one got that. Like, I didn't tell anyone that they're actually in a comedy, like in a satirical kind of farcical comedy. So I was almost like pushing them to the point of overacting because I was like, look, the more you overact, the better this will. The better this will read.
Yeah. Especially with now, like how stylized and fast paced and just like in your face isn't quite the right term I'm going to use it. In your face, it is like you need that bigger acting for it to even stand out at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I mean, what I didn't have the vocabulary to explain to anybody who was working on this is like, you all think that you're working on a live action series, which you are. But it's not a live action series. This is a Saturday morning cartoon that turns into live action, not the other way around. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great way to describe it.
So it was almost like I was working on 4 different things. I was working on 4 different projects that I knew at the end would kind of converge into one thing, but I needed them to kind of all operate independently of one another.
Yeah.
Because I knew, hey, this piece is going to be this piece is going to be that, this piece is going to be like funny, this is going to be dumb. And then when we bridge them, but again, like, no one really knew what I was doing until like right at the end. And then we got into Cannes and everyone was like, what the fuck?
Dude, that's super cool. Like, first off, staying with Sling for 6.5 years to get it done, that's an achievement. It takes a lot of fortitude to make something like that happen.
Yeah. No, it definitely did. It was like, I think there was like kind of a meta aspect of it as well, where it's like, I didn't want to just make something conventional, right? Because I know how the movie ecosystem works. I knew how that apparatus worked. If I needed to game it, I knew how to game it, right? What you do is you make an action. I knew what those steps looked like, right? I wanted to really challenge myself because I wanted to know what my limits were. This is going to sound a little egomaniacal, but like in my 20s, I kind of just had success, and it was like kind of wild success. It wasn't like normal.
Yeah, you're making big Hollywood movies.
It was fucking crazy.
There's not a lot of people that are doing that.
No, and I'm like,
that's the dream of like so many people.
Right. And I just showed up here and I was doing it. It wasn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then like, and then like, I was like, okay, I really want to like kind of stretch myself and learn what my limits were. And then I reached the breaking point with this because I'm like, oh, this is my limit. Okay, I need some of it back. Like I really like, I think the project like definitely gave me gray hairs and probably a bunch of health problems. But yeah, it was so challenging. And also I think it was like a year and a half in, I was like, I don't have the vocabulary, the knowledge, the skill set, the personality to get this done. Like, I'm like, I just don't. I was self-aware enough to know that I don't. Like, I don't have the tools to get this done.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was like, okay. So you should either like kind of pack your bags and just be like, all right, cool. I don't. Or become the guy that you need to become to get this done.
Ooh. That's the way to go.
Right?
Yeah.
And I knew that like, okay, there's like weird emotional hangups that I have and like core limiting beliefs and self-sabotaging tendencies and whatever the fuck they are. I need to look at them, stare them down, say bye to them, cut the cord with them to become the guy that can finish this thing. Or just not finish it.
Right.
And then so I committed to like the self-growth aspect.
That's
in order
good.
to like become the thing. I'd say it's more like a couple years in. And then it slowly, so the project transformed me as well, like I needed to change as a human being. I needed to grow, like crack under pressure, grow through adversity. Diamonds are only created under pressure. It's like whatever that cliche is. I'm sounding like a motivational speaker right now, but yeah, this necessitated a lot. Also, there were a lot of helpers along the way, right? And I'm not talking about the crew and the team that ultimately assembled to help me get this across the finish line, right? Because once you know your strengths and weaknesses, as you pointed out, then you know, okay, I can do this piece of the puzzle, but I probably shouldn't. And someone else, and then you're like, oh, you want to do it? Cool. So there was like a whole Voltron thing that assembled around me to help this across the
nice
the finish line. at some point, you've met a couple of them actually you've met a couple of them. Like you've met Graham, for instance.
Yep.
Graham is one of the Voltron guys.
Do you feel like this piece, do you feel like Guardians of the Justice kind of is a little bit of your meta story, at least in this phase, like this later phase of your filmmaking career?
Absolutely. 1000%. You know, the crazy thing is, the only reason I did Castlevania was to learn how to do animation so I could finish this.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Like, it's funny when there's like this, sometimes people are like, man, do you feel proud of Castlevania? I'm like, dude, that was like a side project so I could learn a skill to do this. like,
that's the story of like every corridor video. It's like, oh, it was actually an experiment, or we needed to learn how to do this one effect. And it's like, so we just made a video around it.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, learning how to direct in 8 different mediums, which is the shows in 8 different, like, that was like
that's crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And having like not done it before, that was
Yeah.
that was an ordeal. It was an
intense
ordeal.
film school.
It was
the
an
most
ordeal,
intense film school you can have. So it would play at Cannes. Is it up to be bought, or is it already like?
No. So it's for Netflix. So
okay.
So I did this for Netflix, and it was there's an executive there named Larry Tans, who it's just, I mean, at this point you might as well be a father figure to me. At least it feels that way. I don't know if that feels that way to him, but it feels that way to me. You know, he was a supporter of me and this project, and just a champion of the whole thing, and literally pulled me aside a few times. And I was talking earlier about helpers, and I derailed myself, and I'm saying not just helpers in the crew level and the team who made it level, but like, and Larry is one of those people, because, you know, I nearly gave up in 2017. I kind of had a shitty version of it done that I was just like, all right, fuck it, let's get this off. And he called me up and he was like, you know, it seems like you're trying to say something here with this. And is this really what you want to put out? And he's like, I just want you to know, like, you know, you've just done Castlevania, and it's done very, very well, critically and, you know, numbers wise. Like, there's going to be attention on what you do next. So if this is it, great. And I was like, no, this is not it.
Oh, it takes guts for him to say that.
Yes. Well, yeah. I mean, look, again, different, just an amazing man. Like, Larry Tans is a freaking, like, amazing man. Like, he should be, I don't know what he should or should not. I don't want to be an arbiter of that, but he's just an amazing dude. And I think, you know, a lot of filmmakers in the past that we revere, there's always an executive there that just believed in them, championed them, supported them. My mom also said the same thing, which was really interesting. Because there was someone who worked on an aspect of the project who came over to my place and was like, you need to get this out. This needs to get out. Like, all these people want it out. Like, and I'm like, yeah, I was feeling kind of bad. I'm like, yeah, you know, there are all these people who, like, want it out. And then my mom was like, why is this guy, like, it's kind of selfish. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, you're clearly trying to make something unorthodox. You have a vision here. The dude doesn't care about your vision getting out there. He wants this out so that his resume checks the thing, you know, can check off the resume and jump onto the next thing. She's like, don't work with this guy. And I'm like, wow.
Thanks, Mom.
And I say this to be like, you know, one of the emotional hurdles that I had to conquer was constantly apologizing for my existence. You know, there is a lot of bravado I have, you know, getting the makeup, the talking trash in interview, you know, that, but some of it's real, some of it was just insecurity, and is insecurity, and some of it is just me fucking around because I think it's funny, right? And I wanted to secretly be a professional wrestler, and I like I love the performative aspect, right? Like it's why I like was just like dissing Scorsese at the beginning. Like normal people don't do that. They're not like, but yeah, like I had to kind of grow past this apologizing for my existence, apologizing for my point of view, apologizing for being different. Thing. And again, this is something that Kanye helped me with as well. Because he was like playing me a song from his album, from the new album, not not this one. This was a few years ago. This is the previous one. This was the year when he's like, I'm gonna drop 4 albums, 1 a week for 4 weeks. This was like this. And so he was playing me a song and like explaining to me how he made it. And again, I can't, people have their perspectives and opinions and they are what they are. But to me, Kanye is like just an amazing person, just an amazing person. Just a great human being, and a fantastic artist. And he was explaining to me part of his creative process where he used Paul McCartney in a song, but like Paul McCartney listened to the song and he's like, where I'm not in the song. And he's like, no, I used part of your voice and like remix, you know what I mean? And I thought about it and I was like, wait, hold on. If I'd like kind of shot a thing with Paul McCartney, I'd want to do the same thing. I'd want to like fuck up his image. And that's what I do with the bootlegs, right? Because it's me taking the thing and fucking it up. I have this instinct to take something, kind of consume it and regurgitate it into something completely different. And then the moment I get challenged a little bit from a corporate entity, boom, I'm there, I'm fighting back, right? But the moment it becomes like an interpersonal challenge, then I would like cower. I'd be like, I don't want to hurt this person's feelings. I've been so fortunate. I almost had like too much gratitude for the success I had in my 20s. Just felt bad. Like, I'm like, I don't want to hurt someone's feelings, the whole thing. And I don't know, when we had this whole conversation, I remember the next thing I did is I emailed you, asked you for some footage, went to the editing room and cut that commercial that we were just, it's like using your first person shooter footage, and I like
ultimate gun game video,
right?
Yeah, and
I cut this commercial together with the announcer and like the whole thing, and people were like, "What the fuck is this?" And I'm like, "This is what I'm trying to make." I was like, "The rest of it is gonna be like this."
That's awesome,
and that's why I keep saying every time we talk, I'm like, "Dude, you are a big part of this process."
Well, thanks, man. Dude, I remember when we first met. It was at Comic-Con.
Yeah,
and we had that dark Link video or whatever it's called, Link Shadow. And you're like, "Yo, this is sweet." Yeah, and I was like, "Whoa, you're Eddie Shankar," and the rest was history.
Yeah.
That
was a fun convention.
Yeah, that was a good Comic-Con. That's my first one. I've only gone like 2.5 times since.
Do you remember there was like a dude dressed as Deadpool in the crowd? Do you remember this?
Vaguely.
This is like before Deadpool was a thing.
Right.
And I think you and I kept being like, Deadpool's gonna be, I don't remember. I have this vivid memory of a Deadpool dude with signs, like kind of holding up a sign. I don't know why I'm remembering that, but it was who else was on that panel? It was like,
I know it was like moderated by a guy from Machinima.
Right.
I don't remember. Wait, I feel like there was another guy that did like a couple of really cool shorts from Machinima. And that's about all I remember. There's I was gonna say that Mortal Kombat thing, but you did that, didn't you?
No.
Oh no,
that was Kevin Tantron.
Yeah, okay.
Kevin,
I think he was there.
Yeah, Kevin was there.
Yeah. I remember just being worried that like people are gonna find our video too gory and offensive. Like, even though it's not that gory, but also like all the jank just really stands out when like you see it played in front of a crowd. It's like every weird sound effect, camera bump. Like there's a shot that has like our camera lens cases like on a rock.
I remember being so insecure. And I was like, at this point I had my company was making studio stuff. I think the only reason I was on that panel was because someone at Machinima found out that they're like, wait, this guy made the Punisher thing and he offered it to us and someone said no. I think that they were like, what the fuck? They're like, so they called me and they were like, it was Jeremy.
Jeremy. Yep.
Jeremy was like, hey, next time you have something, let us know. I'm like, I'm doing like a Venom one. They're like, what? Yeah, we're in. We'll show it. The thing. And I was like so insecure to screen into this crowd.
I remember the Venom thing now. Yeah, it was
because I didn't go to the screening because we screened the Punisher one at Comic-Con. I didn't go.
Yeah,
it's the same reason I didn't go to Cannes. Like my whole team is at Cannes. They're like, I don't like showing up to things because like I get I'm very sensitive. Like I'm super sensitive. So when there's a lot of energy being thrown at me, like I get really excited and then my nerves fry out. But I remember just being kind of a douchebag before that panel, right? And I was like, it's got to be only me on the panel. Like, who are these other dudes? And like, someone who worked for me at the time was like, there's going to be more people there to see Corridor Digital than there are to see you. And I'm like, oh, all right, they're cool. And then I hit you up, and then we like met. Remember, we had like lunch in my old office. The crazy old office.
And you've basically been like every time Sam and I are like, we're gonna make a movie, and like we'd always come to you first and be like, here's how it actually works. Here's how the game's actually played, and you'd be like, oh, okay, we're gonna think about this a little bit then.
And then I'm always like, I will help you with this movie as soon as the Guardians of Justice is done. And that conversation was going on for 6.5 years. I'm like, okay, the moment this movie is done, the show is done, like we are making a series together or a movie or something. We're doing something.
Now I have a child.
Yeah.
Another one on the way.
Like you guys have all like, done things with your lives, and I've just finished this project.
You've done more than that.
Yeah. Well, started a Blood Dragon TV show, working on Devil May Cry.
I'm so psyched for that Blood Dragon TV show. Wait, Devil May Cry?
Yeah, I'm doing Devil May Cry, right?
Yeah, I'm just saying that because I'm also excited for that.
Yeah.
When does Guardians of Justice come out? Do you know?
It will likely be top of next year.
Sweet.
Yeah. They want to like dub it in some languages.
I love that you're like a person that places like Netflix are turning to now for like video game properties. I don't know if you love that, but I love that.
I don't know if they're turning to me for video game properties.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think
you're approaching them with video game properties. Well, let me put it this way. I love that if video game properties are getting turned into movies and shows or whatever these days, I love that you're out there making it happen.
Yeah, for sure. No, I dig that also. Again, it feels like a huge blessing because I don't look at myself as a guy with like the secret sauce or anything like that.
I think you have enough of a perspective that makes like video games are weird, like for movies and shows and stuff like that. Like taking those and adapting them because you have so many different weird pressures. Like you have the corporate pressure of like, hey, we publish this video game and you need to tie it into how we sell our game.
Yeah. So part of my strategy is the moment they bring that energy to me, I'm like, hey, yo, go fuck yourself.
That's
like
a good strategy.
I respond it with a go fuck yourself. I'm going to walk energy, not in a disrespectful way. Right.
Right.
But like, how do I say this? I feel like it's a massive disservice to everyone involved if I'm out there making transmedia content, right?
Right.
Like I don't want to be making a commercial for the game that's coming out.
Right. You want to make a piece of content that is what it is. It's its own thing. It's its own story. It's like,
yeah,
I'm not watching this movie so I can go buy the action figure. I'm watching the movie because I want to watch the movie.
And I feel like that's where a lot of companies and game companies, by the way, are super. They what you just said, they're super on board. It's like legacy media Hollywood companies that don't fucking get it. But game companies are super on board with that, right? Because they understand their core business. They're like, we are a game company. So there's no corporate weirdness at all. So I'm saying that with a bunch of bravado. I'm like, yeah, go fuck you. Like, they don't even say that to me, right? Like, Capcom is awesome.
That's good.
Like, they're just like super supportive and positive. Yeah, I mean, like, all of them, they all are. Like, they've literally never brought that energy of corporate pressure, like, ever.
That's incredible. I'm surprised you haven't dealt with that at all. So let me ask you. So when it comes to video game franchises, like, this is the thing I'm like super nerdy and passionate about. You got two options. I feel like when you're making a video game movie, you have the option to either stay really true to the source material, and bring in the fans of the game, and maybe even capture the spark that the game captured initially to bring in new fans, right? Like, where it's just like, wow, whatever. Like if you took Metal Gear Solid 1 and you just basically took the game line for line and shot it as a movie, you could potentially capture the magic that, captured people into that game back then, for people who would see it now who are new. But for the most part, you're just kind of catering to the fans that already exist. Or you have the option of reinventing it and trying something new with the hope of bringing in new fans, but not necessarily catering to the old fans. Where do you lie on that spectrum?
So I don't think there is such a thing as a video game adaptation. So I don't even like engage. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Like, I'll give you an example.
Elaborate.
I'll give you an example of this. Like, Mega Man, Dark Souls, Command and Conquer Red Alert, right? All video games, but they're completely like all they share is this arbitrary classification of being games. Like, there's literally nothing in common between the three of them.
Right.
Right. So the way you would adapt one or engage with one has no bearing on how you'd adapt or engage with another. Right. So each thing, so I don't look at them as games. I look at them as things.
Right.
And each thing is radically different, because sometimes what you're doing, or what you could be doing, is expanding the lore, making something around. I'm going to get too inside baseball here in a confusing way, so I'm going to just pivot. I don't feel like there is a thing as a video game adaptation. And also, as things get more and more, as life gets more and more gamified, I think as time goes on and there's like everyone's a gamer, I think it's, and I lack the vocabulary to like really specifically, precisely explain what I'm trying to convey. But I don't think a video game adaptation is really a thing.
So in the sense that like every game's story is different, so how you approach it is different they all have different pantheons of lore, and they all have different styles of gameplay, and they all have different
some of them are inspired by movies, some of them like like, look, as an example, right? This isn't true, but you've seen it, so I'm gonna okay. Tell me true or false.
Okay.
Guardians of Justice is also a Mortal Kombat adaptation.
True. Yeah.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah. I see what you're saying. Like,
there's so many components to a game versus like a book is simply it's literary. So you're taking the literature and adding visuals around it.
Right.
Games exist in another kind of realm.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're not even really stories. I mean, sure, there's a story, but there's like so much like weird nuance that goes into it.
I mean, yeah, I made a movie out of Battleship. Not a lot of story. I mean, now granted, it's not a video game. It's not a lot of story in that tabletop game.
Okay, but I'll give you an example. Like, you could make like a Christopher Nolan style, grounded and gritty Metal Gear movie, right? But like, part of what makes Metal Gear awesome is the camp.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the weird like sound design and the exclamation marks over people's heads and
Snake going like, huh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So, like you can't just translate the story. I mean, you can, and that's the beauty of it. There are no rules. So I try to approach everything with like my own artistic stamp, integrity, right? And I guess game people understand this intuitively. Games that work, they don't work by accident, right? Like Electronic Arts is like
they're not accidentally continuing to be one of the biggest companies making games.
No, but they make games, but they make like corporate games, right? This is why Electronic Arts, like, do they really make like kind of hits, like emotionally resonant hits?
Once in a while, but not that often,
right?
Yeah,
like their batting average.
It's like their indie studio put out something that actually has a cool storyline, and
but their batting average is kind of low,
right? Yeah, for the big games, for the big games, the biggest. It's Battlefield, which is a multiplayer thing, and you have.
You go back to like Blizzard before it was a conglomerate, right? When they only made 3 games and that was it.
Yeah,
and it was just StarCraft, Warcraft, Diablo.
Yeah,
like every title was a hit,
right?
Because this was like a passionate group of artists getting together to like make something they deeply care about. Like if you look at like the Halo 1 and Halo 2, it was the same thing.
Yeah.
It was like a group of passionate individuals, not unlike Corridor. They're out there just making a piece of art, then it clicks, right? And I think part of the complexity with corporate life, the corporate system, the corporate world, is you get people in a garage or in a warehouse like yours or in a small studio somewhere, and they're throwing things against the wall, and then something sticks, right? And then they get obsessed with it, and they have to get it done. It's like an auteur filmmaker, like any great inventor from back in the day from the history books. They get it done, and it creates shockwaves and ripple effects that like fucking change everything, right? And then the suits come in. And then they spent a lot of time trying to reverse engineer, like, well, how did this chair that they threw against the wall stick to the wall? Was it like the angle? Was it like the tape? And they're like, they spent a lot of time and money trying to reverse engineer why something worked and end up trying to replicate it, which is a fine way to go about life, right? And that's how you get like Electronic Arts. But the bottom line is it's stuck.
Yeah.
Just keep throwing different unique things against the wall, something else will stick.
Yeah.
Reverse engineering the thing that's stuck will just mean that you get a clone of that at best.
I feel that 100% in game media these days.
Right.
And movies.
All of it.
Yeah.
All of it. It's all kind of the corporate interest comes in and tries to reverse engineer. And the artist has already moved on to version 7.0 while they're trying to figure out how 1.0 happened.
Yeah.
How did we get on that?
I don't know. It was a good tangent. Oh, I was asking you about like your approach to video game movies, but I think you answered that perfectly.
Yeah, and game companies, and so I think game companies, especially the game companies that I'm working with, right? So it would be the ones that we publicly have been announced, which is Ubisoft, Capcom, Craft On with PUBG. They're just forward thinking in a way that like traditional legacy media companies are just not. And I think part of the reason they're so forward thinking is traditional media companies, the legacy media companies, they've operated like coal miners or like gold miners, like a miners, right? To the extent where they're like, okay, we make a product, so we're going to control the tools that allow us to make the product and no one else can make it. We control the distribution and the marketing. So no one else can, if they make the product somehow, they can't get it through our distribution channels. And we'll control the actors, the movie stars, the marketing tools that let the general public know that this is worthwhile. So the legacy media companies, like they controlled the entire process, top to bottom, for decades. Right? This is why very few movies made outside of the system even got through. And if like one got through, like My Big Fat Greek Wedding, it was like a big deal, right? And even like seminal movies that were supposedly made outside the system, you're like, wait, that was made by like the indie label of the studio.
Right. Sony Pictures Classics.
Right. So, and then the studios worked kind of like cartels, right? They worked, there was a handful, there were like 6 of them. And they worked together to be like, okay, we are going to, it's us. We are the barons. We are the gatekeepers. We are the creators of global culture. And they were for the longest time, right? Game companies evolved very differently. And they evolved differently because they were basically tech companies, right? And I think big tech gets a lot of credit for this. But Nintendo had personal computers in people's homes around the same time, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what it is. It's just a
Yeah.
like Nintendo created a handheld mobile device before Steve Jobs even started the iPod, right? So game companies are really tech companies, and they're forced to innovate every year. It's about having cutting edge technology, right? Movie studios, legacy media, they didn't need to because they controlled the barriers to entry. So no one could compete with them. So they're like, let's not innovate too much. Let's not fuck shit up, right?
Yeah.
Like the best innovations you have are things like 3D, you know? Versus with game companies, like they had to innovate.
Yeah.
And it wasn't as simple as like, oh, well, we own this franchise, so it's gonna, you know, we own Mission Impossible or whatever franchise, and that's going to result in people coming and showing up. Like as we've seen from Medal of Honor, like if you stop innovating, great, people will move on to Call of Duty.
Yeah.
Like overnight. So game companies are built on a spinal structure of innovation, right? Like Ubisoft's been around since the 1980s, but the only reason they've survived is because on some level they had to keep pushing.
Yeah.
And so I think when you deal with game companies, a lot of times they're like easier to deal with than legacy media companies because they're trying to figure out what's next versus legacy media companies are afraid of what's next because what's next is extinction for them. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. But if you don't change, you're going to go extinct.
Right.
Yeah.
And in a way,
Man, it's always good talking to you about this stuff because you always have so much insight on it. And like you said, you're not a business guy, but you still like your observations are always just good to hear. Like it really makes me feel comfortable about where we are as a business. Versus like, I'm like, man, it's so good I'm not working for the studios. Like, you know, maybe it would be cool to do a studio movie, but
just some more about you, right? Like let's look at where we're likely heading over the next 10 years. The trust in the mainstream media has just completely eroded and is eroding at an all-time rapid pace, right? All these mainstream media outlets are trying to move online in order to capture an online base and finding that they don't actually have an audience. What they had on TV was a passive audience.
Okay.
Right? So like people watch CNN in the background. When people watch a corridor video, they're actively seeking it out. They're engaging with it, right?
Yeah.
So it's a different kind of engagement. The passive, old media, old world, passive engagement, like, oh, I'm browsing the grocery store and I see this magazine that tells me that I have to watch this new Hugh Jackman thing because he's the most important person in the world. Now is like, it doesn't work the same way online.
Yeah.
So it's not that people aren't being marketed to, they're just having to be marketed to differently online.
Yeah.
And you have your own streaming platform.
Yeah. Which is like, when we started that, I remember mentioning it to you too. It's like another streaming platform, which is like what a lot of people have been saying, but I think that's the direction we're going as an industry is like, yeah, you pay your $3, $4, $5, $10 a month to whatever platform you want to absorb content from. And then when you're finished with it, you can cancel and you can go to somebody else. But also just the concept of stepping away from ad supported media and getting into like speaking with your money and be like, no, this is what I want. And I don't want you to have to deal with ad companies to make it. You can just deal with me.
It's the future.
Yeah.
It's literally I think that's the future. It's a decentralized media ecosystem, right? So when I say mainstream media, I don't mean like that's a very like political term. I don't mean it just in the political sense. Like there was a monolith or a series of monoliths that dictated what people in the world consumed and when they consumed it and how they consumed it and their narrative around what they're watching. Right?
Yeah.
The monolith went, this is what a good movie looks like. This is what a bad movie looks like. And I'm like, this is bullshit. Because like to me, Night at the Roxbury is like one of the greatest social satires I've ever seen. You know, it's like really a deconstruction of like the tribal myths around. Well, anyways,
we'll do another podcast on Night of the Roxbury.
But Night at the Roxbury is a fucking classic and has like a 12 on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, because critics like rag on it.
They rag on it because it doesn't fit into the narrative of what is good, right? And I think what people are discovering more and more and more is like, hold up, I have an individual taste. I'm an individual. I have individual preferences. I don't necessarily fit into red or blue, gray or this or that. They're like these binary options that have been presented to me as like a democracy are really just binary options.
Yeah.
And you're part of that wave, dude. You're part of that wave because you're giving people a hyper specific experience that they seek out, emotionally engage with. And your end goal isn't to, you know, grow 100x into it's not to do that, right? Your whole business model is like sustainable growth.
Yeah, we just want to make cool videos and stories, and the only way we're going to do that is with an audience that wants to see them, and then a direct connection between us and the audience.
And you own your own business.
Yeah.
Right? So you don't have a board of directors saying like, hey, listen, kid. All right, you grew less this year than you did last year. All right, you got to grow a little faster. Can't you do a cat video, okay? Or maybe make a fucking sitcom, okay? Kids, I fucking love sitcoms. Let's make a sitcom, okay, with guns. Like you're not having that. Like there's no like overlord trying to push a business metric that ultimately is like a virus, right? Because the idea that you have to grow more this year than you did last year and you have to grow next year more than you did 2 years ago, that's like, it's like a virus mindset.
Yeah.
No one's fucking forcing that shit down your throat.
Yeah.
So this just becomes like a artistic exercise where you've built a apparatus that allows you to sustainably exist in it, not necessarily even grow it, just exist in it.
Yeah.
And everything about you has been fucking organic, dude. And that's one of the many things I respect about you.
We're the organic produce section of YouTube.
You're like the Whole Foods of people.
Oh man. I feel like this is the part where I also need to give a massive shout out and thank you to all the quarterdigital.com subscribers, because they're the ones who are enabling us to take that next step and to do these transformations that you're talking about.
And Abdullah.
And Abdullah. Shout out to you too. Yeah. Well, it's been a wonderful conversation with you. It's been nice seeing you again, because I haven't actually seen you in like 2 years.
Yeah.
Ever since the world locked down.
And I got this like sick jacket.
It is a sick jacket. I like the green colors.
I feel like I'm a biker dude right now.
You could fall over and you get back up and you wouldn't be scratched.
Totally. Remember when you first asked me on the podcast, when you started, remember what I first said? You called me up and you're like, hey, we're starting a podcast. We'd love to have you on. And I said, I'm totally down. I look fat right now. So I'm going to work out a little bit. And then I'd love to come on. Right?
Right.
And I haven't worked out since then. So this is growth. Right?
Yeah, I was going to say, this is growth. This is you going like, you know what? Screw everybody. I'm just going to go on there. The most
interesting thing about me is not how I fucking look.
Or like, that guy on the podcast, did you hear him? Did you hear how ripped he sounded?
He's just so fucking chiseled. Like, oh my God, I need to just like and subscribe to that guy. Just you know.
Yeah. For all the people who are audio only, they're like, cool.
Like I got people in like Ireland that are like, oh my God, I got the like and subscribe. He looks so good. Not Scottish.
You're way better at accents than I am.
I love doing, I'm doing an American, we've talked about this. I'm doing an American accent right now.
Yeah. Does that weird you out at all? Like, do you realize you don't have like an accent anymore because you can just you can speak in whatever accent you want? You like, do you have like that crisis of identity?
Nah, little bit. I think it's more annoying to people like who spend a lot of time around me because I start like just talking to them in different voices.
Let me hear just Audie. Let me hear how you talk to yourself in your head.
Dude, it's crazy because it's like all the different, they kind of all merge, right? Mm-hmm. I'm like, hey, how you doing? Like, it's like, well, I'm doing quite well right now. I'm not quite sure. I'm constantly having these like conversations with myself.
Yeah, man.
But yeah, like, I think at some point I will convert this accent into like a more like Snake Plissken gruff dude.
Oh,
Be
yeah.
like, hey, Niko. It's good to see you, bro.
I'm like, hey, Audie.
It's dark out there.
Let me get you a flashlight.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah, man. Dude, thank you so much for having me on. This is
Thank
so
you.
much fun.
Thank you. Anything you like, if people want to like keep an eye out for Guardians of Justice or like follow anything you're making, any spot they should go to, or
yeah, they should just subscribe to your platform some more. Just follow me on Instagram.
Yeah,
or Facebook, but really Instagram.
What's your Instagram?
At Bootleg Universe.
Okay. So be posting like updates on Guardians and whatever else you're kind of doing. Maybe.
Yes, just random stuff. I just started posting on Instagram, and it's at Bootleg Universe because for a while I was like, maybe I should change my name to Bootleg Universe.
Like personally.
Yeah.
Like, hey, Boot.
Like, yo, my name's Bootleg Universe, motherfucker. Like, yeah. Yeah, I've thought about changing my name so many.
I mean, you could be Mr. Universe.
I feel like people would think I was a bodybuilder or something, and then
they probably
I
would
would get the body dysmorphia back.
Oh,
You know
yeah.
what I mean? They'd be like, bro, I thought you were going to be ripped and jacked, and frankly, I can kick your ass. So I'm not impressed. Yeah.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you for listening. Consider subscribing to the Corridorcast if you aren't.
And at Bootleg Universe,
Yeah, follow
I need
Eddie
some
at
validation.
Bootleg Universe.
Validate me.
Go say, hey, you're awesome on the podcast. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like my shit.
All right, man. That's it. We're signing off. Bye,
We're signing
everybody.
off. Bye, everybody. Bang.